Hi, everyone. This is Hal Krosman with Screenwriting U, and today we're going to be talking about horror. We're going to analyze the movie Saw, and I'm going to take you through and show you a new horror model that we just recently created that has been getting rave reviews from screenwriters. And also then we'll talk about the upcoming 30-day class for those of you who really want to become amazing at writing horror. So let's just jump into this. If you go back to the very first page and you take a look, you'll see at the top we have listed a bunch of different movies. Horror has this really interesting part about it when it comes to the movie business. And this is something that really doesn't exist anyplace else. Every once in a while there's a breakout that's a drama. Every once in a while there's a thriller breakout. Sometimes a rom-com breaks out. Not very often, but every once in a while. But horror, almost every year, has some kind of major breakout movie that turns into a franchise. So what this means is this, and this is the first line there. It says, for producers, horror is the most profitable of all genres. Horror is the most profitable of all genres. Now, again, you take a look. These numbers, in some cases, are just crazy. Paranormal Activity, the original budget was $15,000. It ended up making back $193 million. That's just insane. Blair Witch Project, $60,000 was the original budget. It ended up making back $248 million. And by the way, this isn't talking about the entire franchise. This is just talking about the original movie. Saw, the budget was $1.2 million. It ended up making back $103 million. So that's 100 times its money. Now, again, when you take a look at these, you'll understand why producers are really interested in certain kinds of horror movies. And here's the thing. Let's just fill in this blank down here because it makes it really clear. Successful horror equals low budget, but with a tremendous upside potential. Now, that's from an investment perspective. Normally, when I do these kinds of classes and we analyze a movie and we present a class and all that kind of thing, I don't start out talking about the finances on it. I don't start out talking about the money on it. But the reason I put this up front was because I want you to see if you do the right things, producers are going to flip over the possibility of working with you. And that's the thing that I see here. It's like, it's there to a producer. There is an incredible opportunity that didn't exist before. And let me back it up and tell you what I mean. If we back up, let's say, 10 years ago. And I know some of these movies came out before 10 years ago, but I don't think until Paranormal Activity came out and Blumhouse, the company that created it, then duplicated that a couple of times. Until it had happened a couple of times, producers were just looking at it the way they look at all of them. It's like, oh, look, we had a thriller breakout this year. Everybody has always said there's always one movie every year that people think is a sleeper, people think has no hope, and then it breaks out, right? And it's like one movie a year. It wasn't until Blumhouse had 2 or 3 in a row that ended up making 50 times their budget that suddenly producers started looking at this in a very different way. Up until that point, they would look at they're putting together a movie. They would put together whatever the budget is. Let's say it's $1 million. They would go out and they would raise $1 million, hoping to be able to pay their investors back. That was the big hope. If we could just pay our investors back, then they'll invest in our next movie, right? And the big worry was that they wouldn't be able to pay their investors back. Now what's possible, and this is only in the horror genre, what's possible is two things. Number one is a great horror that fits the model I'm about to give you could easily break out. There's multiple horror movies that break out pretty much every year right now. And second, it could become a franchise. So the level of upside potential when they go to investors on it, the level of upside potential is insane. It's like, people are rolling the dice thinking there's a chance they may hit the lottery. It's astounding. So when I talked with a couple of producers and we had these conversations about this, and they were saying, I'm looking for horror, and I'm like, you don't do horror movies. And it's like, no. If I can find the right horror movie, I do horror movies. And it's like, okay, so that creates an opportunity for the writer. That means that this is a genre that if you can really truly master this genre, you have the kind of chance, that writers don't normally have. First, you have hungry producers out there who are constantly looking at horror movies. Second, when a producer sees something that actually fits the model I'm about to at least talk with you about, when a producer sees something that fits that model, suddenly you are the most attractive writer they've ever seen in their lives. Suddenly you're somebody who's bringing in gold and diamonds to them. I think it makes a huge difference, and it gives you all kinds of opportunities. So we're going to talk about what this is, what this model is, and what works with it in just a second. Before we jump into it, I didn't introduce myself at the beginning. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Hal Krosman. I am the president of Screenwriting U. I'm a guy who came from the world of corporate training. And what I do is I design what are called expert models. We create in a different way than other screenwriting teachers create. We specifically work with this particular way of designing training that made us famous back when we were working with corporations. And I trained over 125 corporations over a 15-year period of time, and we became very, very successful at producing real results that other people hadn't produced. I had multiple times where companies would go through and they would have 4 or 5 different training organizations come in. They would track exactly what was the success at the event, and then what was the success 30 days later. Our training programs often quadrupled the success of others 30 days later. And what that meant was that the skills had stuck, that the people had actually learned the model, and that they were able to perform using this new level of skills. So that's what we do. What we do is, in this industry, is we help writers break into the industry. We help writers learn the new models that producers are asking for right now. Again, if we back up 10 years ago, the model I'm about to present you didn't even exist. The model that we do for our thriller program 10 years ago didn't exist. These models are specifically coming from what producers say they need and what movies have been incredibly successful in these areas. So I just wanted to let you know that up front. Let's jump into it. Let's go through this. I think you're going to love what we're going to present today. And again, for those of you who want to master this, we actually have a program set up starting March 6th where you can master it, where you can learn the entire model start to finish, and you can apply it to your current horror script or the new one that you're about to create, and every horror script you create from then on, to dramatically increase your chance that a producer says yes to you. So here we go. Key, and you'll see a line there that says key, producers want. This isn't what they said to me 10 years ago, because I was actually interviewing producers 10 years ago. I started about 15 years ago. But this is what they're saying now. Producers want smart horror. Smart horror. Now, some of them will call it elevated horror. You may have heard that term. I'm going to say smart horror for the moment, but they're pretty much the same thing. It's just smart horror, I think, goes a little further. I'm going to get back to that. Let's go through the main problems with unproduced horror scripts so that you can see the difference between these two very, very clearly. So, often it's and fill in this blank, it's a drama with horror elements. This is the most consistent thing I see when somebody tells me they have a horror movie. It's a drama with horror elements. Now, a lot of times they'll point to certain movies and they'll say, like, well, The Conjuring had a lot of drama in it. And it's like, by the way, I'm not saying you shouldn't have drama in your script. The Conjuring had a lot of drama in it. And it's like, yes, but keep in mind, The Conjuring came with a built-in audience. The Conjuring came with an entire audience of people who already believed in the lead characters, the real life lead characters, who were already following them, who had read their books and the whole thing. So The Conjuring isn't a normal example of what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about are the movies that break out without anybody having any idea where they came from. And they're not based on books or that kind of thing. They're not based on a built-in audience. They are just incredibly successful because of the things we're about to talk about. The second part of it, often it's a drama with horror elements, or it's a horror, nonstop horror with little or no story. So you've got to get a balance between those two. And the truth is it needs to deliver on the horror genre, and it needs to have a great story. Because both of those keep us involved and engaged and living this movie. So underneath that it says it's either blank, not blank enough, or it's too blank. Just put the word scary in both of those. It's either not scary enough or it's too scary. And it really can become too scary, especially with, we've got this whole model called scary as hell scenes that you could easily get to the point where it's way too scary, where it is flipping audiences out. So you've got to be kind of careful about this, and you got to know the balance. The other problem, the second problem, B, is cheap scares instead of unique horror that draws audiences. Now, this is really important to think about. When I see a movie that was primarily written by the filmmaker and created by the filmmaker, often they will have a whole bunch of cheap scares in there. And it'll be lots and lots of shaky cam and lots of things thrown at the camera and stuff like that. And they'll be doing all these visual tricks because they don't have real horror built into the story. And there's a difference. Yes, you can add the visual tricks, but you know what? If you've got real horror built in the story, you don't have to do shaky cam, and you don't have to throw things at the camera. You don't have to do cheap tricks because the horror itself is built in. And you're going to see when we get to this part of the model, you're going to see, and I'm sorry if I'm too excited about this, but I love this model. It's incredible. You'll see even today when we talk about the Amanda scene, you will get to see how the emotions are sequenced and how they are built in. We've got a complete model for that that I think you're going to absolutely love. C, it is not a satisfying journey, put in the word satisfying journey, through a horror gauntlet. It's not a satisfying journey through a horror gauntlet. And again, you have to have both of those. It does need to be a satisfying journey. We are going on the journey with these characters. And the horror gauntlet means, you know what? There's a certain point along the way. In Act 1, there's going to be a certain amount of horror. In Act 2, yes, you're going to ramp it up a little bit. By the time we get to Act 3, it's going to be nonstop horror, right? But the horror gauntlet needs to be fairly consistent, and it needs to escalate. And so, again, this is stuff that you think about as you're creating this. And then D, it is not intentionally designed, and this is the big thing, it's not intentionally designed to draw an audience. And this is one of the keys. You got to be thinking about this beforehand. Your job is to figure out, how do you create something that draws an audience? Because if you can do that, right, if you go back and you look at Saw drew an audience, even Blair Witch. I remember back when they were marketing Blair Witch. I talked with the vice president from Artisan, who their company was one of the buyers in Blair Witch and the distributors. And it was interesting. They knew how, they had decided how to draw an audience early in the process. And that was one of the big keys to the success of that movie. It's also why the movies since then haven't actually succeeded very well, because that model only worked one time. But if you know how, if you're looking at this from a perspective of drawing an audience, when you sit down with a producer to pitch it, they're going to see something they would never see in a normal horror movie. So that makes a huge difference. Let's talk about the model. So I'm going to give you 5 parts to this model, and every single one of them is very important. Number 1, put the words high concept. High concept. This means you can say it in a single sentence, and people instantly light up. They instantly are hooked. This is what's missing from a lot of the filmmaker horror movies. It's like what they're doing is they're just doing, I'm going to show you some really cool things on the screen. And it's like, no, if it doesn't have a high concept, it's not marketable. And it doesn't actually fit this model that we're calling smart horror or elevated horror. Number 2, put the word unique villain / monster. Unique villain / monster. And for this, I'll just call whatever that person is or that thing is a monster. So for horror, I'm just going to say that. You need a unique monster. You need someone. It's probably the most important person in a horror movie. There's something about it that's unique. There's something about it that's mysterious. There is something about it that's so scary that just looking at it terrifies us. Number 3, you need unique terror and horror situations. Unique terror and horror situations. So you'll see that in Saw. You actually saw that if you watched the Amanda scene. You saw a unique terror situation. And so, again, this is one of these things. It's like if what you're doing is just doing the same thing that you see in every single horror movie, you have to think outside that box. Now, you still need the conventions, and we're going to go through the conventions in just a moment. The conventions still need to be there in order for it to match a horror movie. I just had 2 of my writers who didn't go through this class, who had labeled their script horror. They then got it to producers. Both producers came back and said, these are dramas with horror elements. And it was like, okay, the story actually matched the conventions of a drama, but they were calling it a horror movie because it had some violence in it. and it had some killing in it. And it's like, oh no, it's still a drama with horror elements. Not enough. You need to actually really truly match the conventions. But having said that, part of that is about finding some kind of unique terror. What is it that makes the terror and the horror in your movie unique? Number 4, a horror journey that doesn't exist mainly because characters make bad decisions. So listen, this is the other thing. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, audiences would still go watch movies where the characters made bad decision after bad decision after bad decision, right? It's like the character has the chance to go. They can either run down the road or they can go hide in this garage where the monster just killed their friend a couple of minutes ago. Why did they just choose to hide in the garage? And if you look at it really, it's because the filmmaker, because usually that's where it is. It's the people who are actually making the movies. They hadn't written a script. They hadn't thought about how to do it. So they went, I need to get them back in there again so that we have more horror, right? So they didn't create a reason for it. It's just the person made a bad decision. And it's like, I got it. When somebody's in high stress, yes, there's a better chance they're going to make a bad decision. But if the entire movie is based upon these characters making bad decisions over and over and over and over again, just so they can go to where the monster is, that's not good. It's like, how many times have you watched a bad horror movie and you go, oh no, don't go down in the basement? It's like, really? Are you going to go down in the basement again? It's crazy, right? So smart horror doesn't include your characters making bad decisions in order to create the horror. They need to be making what they think is the best decision, and you need to design it in a way so that it brings the horror to them without them knowing. That even the best decision they make actually is part of the setup to create the horror. Right? You actually see that in Saw in 3 or 4 places, and just in this movie, where they're making decisions that are natural for them, and that natural decision leads them into the horror again. Right? So that's smarter horror. That's what you need. Number 5, finally, it is low budget. And I know that there are going to be people who say, but you can do so much more with special effects nowadays. Yes, you can, and you still need to keep your movie low budget. When somebody has to go high budget in order to make it work, they're relying on the special effects to create that horror. What do you do if the producer comes back and says, sorry, I couldn't get that budget, and so I can't do those special effects? Now you're going to have to create some kind of horror there that's still as interesting as if it had the special effects. So my advice would be, figure out your horror and what makes it unique in the beginning. Do it without it being special effects. And blood splattering is not special effect, by the way. It doesn't take a lot of effort to do that. And having people's throats cut and all those kinds of things, it doesn't take that much effort. But when you have characters who are transforming constantly, and then that's what the whole thing is built around, it's like, you know what? You're probably already starting to raise the budget. If you take it further than that, if all of your horror is built around special effects, you're going to make this movie high budget, which means there's more risk to the producer. So I'd just be kind of careful about that. The conventions. And by the way, don't worry, I'm going to take you through Saw and how these things show up in a moment. But the conventions. Let's start with the first one. Number 1, please put the words terrorize the characters. So your job is to create the experience of horror for your audience by taking your characters to the point of hysteria. That's pretty important. And by the way, your job also, you may not get your audience to the point of hysteria, but it's not just that we're watching characters who have certain emotions. It's that our job is to translate those emotions to the audience as much as possible. I was watching one horror movie where this one lady, the lead character, kept going in and out of hysteria all the time. And I didn't experience the hysteria. I experienced sitting there going, why is this actress acting hysterical about minor things? And the reason why, by the way, was it was another movie done by a filmmaker who hadn't done a good job of writing it. What they had written was an outline for the movie, and then they would get together with the actresses and say, what if you did this? And it's like, run over here, let's run over there, let's do this, right? Act hysterical when you see this thing. And it's like, that doesn't work. That doesn't work anymore. So the job now is to terrorize the characters in a way that translates the emotion to the audience. So you'll see when we get to the Amanda scene, when we designed the actual program, we are focused a lot on how you translate those emotions to the audience. This is one of the big keys to your success. Second convention, isolation. Isolation. Now keep in mind, your characters, if they could walk away from this, once people start getting killed, they would, right? So you've got to isolate them. It's part of the conventions. It's part of the way the horror movies happen. And the setting, how you choose that setting, is you want to choose a place that creates a situation where the characters are alone and they're essentially powerless against the monster. Number 3, put the word death. So you need to threaten your characters with awful, violent, and torturous deaths. And this, somebody asked me, is it possible to do a horror movie without anyone actually dying? Maybe. Maybe. The question is this: does it actually serve the bigger purpose? Does it actually, if you do something like that, does it actually serve the movie? Will people come out of that movie still buzzing and telling their friends they have to go see that horror movie? So you decide. But this movie, it's really, this is about taking people to the brink of death and insanity, and very likely you're going to have a lot of deaths in that movie. Number 4. Then, of course, you need a monster or a villain. This is a person that's going to inflict endless terror and violence. So number 5, high tension. You are going to be putting your characters in sinister situations that are totally out of their control. And then your job is to, again, turn the heat up to the point of hysteria. So, And then number 6, there's a departure from reality. Now listen, we debated this when I had my development team together, and we had an amazing development team for this program. We debated this. It's like, okay, there are some horror movies that seem fairly real. I got that. They're in real time. They could actually really happen. Sometimes they did happen, things like that. But in general, there's some kind of departure from reality, which means this is not a normal situation. If a ghost shows up in your living room and goes after you, that's not a normal situation. There's a departure from reality. If somebody looks in a mirror and they see a monster in that mirror looking back at them, that's not a real situation. That's not reality, right? Even what we're doing in Saw here, these guys they're trapped in this bathroom. They're chained to the wall, and they have to cut off their foot, right? It's like, I'm sorry, that's actually a departure from reality. If not, how many people do you know that this has really happened to? So it's okay in horror to depart from reality. In fact, it's one of the conventions. If you look at The Purge, for instance, If just start with the concept. For 12 hours, any person in the United States can create any crime without repercussions, without being charged, right? It's like that's a departure from reality. That never has happened in the history of this nation or any nation that I know of. So, yeah. And then finally, number 7, and this is another one we debated, but lately it seems to have become more and more interesting, and it also, what it does is it gives a layer to this story that gives the audience something to hold on to. Please put the word moral statement. Moral statement. So, even though we're looking at horror, there's often a social statement in there, and the older horrors, and these are the easier ones to make it. It's like the first person that had sex got killed, right? The first person that acted like a coward got killed. The first one that turned on their friends got killed. And it's like, okay, that was a way of delivering some kind of moral message. This movie Saw had a moral message in it. So it's just something to consider. You may or may not like that one, but I would say that kind of keeps us more grounded. It has people coming out and actually feeling like something good did happen in this. Just again, something to consider. Let's go to the next page. Creating the emotions for horror, and this is one of the parts of the model that we came upon. We actually decided up front. I decided before I even created this model. One of the things we were going to do was we were going to find out how to deliver every single emotion. And what I wanted to do was get a how-to on every emotion that would make it simple for you to be able to create those emotions, sequence them, change them around, set it up in scenes so that you could have any sequence of emotions you would like, and they would ultimately lead to some type of horror. So the big question is, how do you get an audience to experience the emotions of dread, of terror, of even hysteria, right? And again, remember, we're trying to get the audience to experience it, not just the characters. So, first thing there is, it says we blank emotions to be experienced by the audience. We intentionally design emotions to be experienced by the audience, intentionally. This isn't if I put enough bad stuff in this scene, it'll be good. If I have the monster chase them, that will give us the audience the emotions. Maybe, maybe not. It might have them laugh instead of be scared. So it's important. So underneath that it says, think about put in the words, audience experience. Think about the audience experience. And then underneath that, create situations that naturally cause emotion. Create situations that naturally cause emotion. If you can become a master at this, whether it's this genre or any other, you're going to be a great screenwriter. So I actually had, in the last group, I had some people who took this horror class just to learn how to create those 10 emotions that we have in the horror class, because they wanted to get better in the genres that they work in. And it makes sense, too. Once you see it, you'll understand. And then the next line, know exactly how to cause an audience to experience each horror emotion. And that's part of your job. Doing these things will show you as a professional screenwriter. Now, having talked about all of that, now let's talk about Saw. Let's go into it. And you guys, I'm sure you've had a chance to watch this movie. If you clicked the link that we gave you, you had a chance to watch the Amanda scene, which I'm going to be getting to in a couple of moments. We're going to go through and actually look at every emotion in the Amanda scene. because it's intense. But let's go back to Saw. Saw. Let's see. The budget on this movie was $1.2 million. The box office was $103 million. So the movie itself made back 100 times the budget. Pretty wild. The franchise itself has made $873 million. That's wild. Now listen. This movie, it was created by two guys in Australia. The screenplay was actually written by Lee Whannell. He was the writer. They gave story credit also to James Wan. He was the director in the situation. And what these guys did, I thought, was really interesting. They'd come up with this whole thing. They had created this screenplay, and they got it optioned to a producer in Australia, who then couldn't get it made. So they decided to come to Los Angeles, and they wrote and rewrote and then shot a $5,000 short. That was the scene that you just saw. That was part of why I had you watch that scene. Except instead of Amanda being the one who was in there being tortured with the bear trap on, it was Lee Whannell who was being tortured. They brought that to town. They had a bunch of producers who watched it and were interested. When they finally got to the producers that they ended up with, the one producer watched it, and he said at the end of watching that 3-minute video, he said his jaw had dropped. And he said he went into his partner and he says, "We have to do this." Those two, the producers, ended up mortgaging the building that their production company was in order to raise the funds to make this movie. Now, if you think about that, they weren't just risking somebody else's money. They looked at this movie and they knew it was going to be amazing, and they knew that it was going to change things and that it really did have a chance. And this is the thing we're trying to get to. Our objective is to get to where anybody who reads your screenplay has that experience. So let's kind of go through what we know about this. First, the concept. The high concept of this movie. In order to survive, people are forced to face torturous dilemmas, requiring them to choose between their own life and a gruesome alternative. So we saw that many times in this movie, and then if you look at the franchise, that's what survived throughout the entire franchise. And over and over and over, people were put in these torturous dilemmas. The conventions, so terrorizing the characters. First, these characters, most of the time, they're waking up into these brutal traps. They then go through the terror of realizing where they are, and then at that point, they're forced between dying and doing something truly horrific. So they are being terrorized. They're on a clock. It's going to happen one way or another. They have to make these terrible decisions. Death, is there death? Yes. The reverse bear trap, we saw in the video that could easily kill her. The razor wire tunnel killed the one guy. Lawrence's family are on the edge of being killed. Adam has been poisoned. Adam gets shot. People are going insane, doing whatever it takes to save themselves from death, and sometimes, only a few times, they've succeeded, right? So there's death present in that situation. The monster. The monster in this case is the Jigsaw Killer. He is the trap master, right? He is someone who intricately designs these traps and these puzzles in a way that forces people into life and death situations, and they can only be solved by paying a truly morbid price. So that's pretty interesting, pretty compelling. Are you noticing this is pretty smart horror? High tension. Well, first, there's life and death puzzles. Second, there's morbid dilemmas. Third, there are ticking clocks in this situation and impending doom. So the tension is insane on this. Departure from reality, yeah, these are extreme situations. It's like, you know, I don't know anybody that I've ever met who woke up with a bear trap on their face that was going to rip their jaw off. You know, I don't on almost all the situations you see, I've never heard of them. So they're thinking outside reality. They are departing from reality. They're extrapolating things that may have happened to animals or may have happened in other situations, and then doing everything they can to make them horrific. Moral statement. So people are given a chance. Usually these are people, by the way, who have given up on their life and they stopped caring. And now they're being put to the test to discover how much their life really matters. And we see that in the end of the Amanda scene. When she survives, you know, the little guy on the doll on the bicycle comes out and tells her now she doesn't take her life for granted anymore. Which is, you know, pretty interesting. So let's go to the Amanda scene, and now we're going to be talking about emotions. And listen, for what we're going to do here, I'm going to identify these emotions. The real question is, how do you create them? And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But let's first look at this. So we start in the beginning. And notice I've got them numbered 1 through 16 on the left-hand side. That way it's easy for you and I to sync up here. We start in the beginning, and Lawrence is in the police station. Now, he's been being interrogated, and he just wants to leave, right, at that point. But they ask him to watch an interview with Amanda, the only surviving victim of the Jigsaw killer. Just that right there makes him curious, right? So put in the words curiosity. Now, it also starts to create sympathy for Amanda, so you can put that in if you'd like also. From there, Amanda starts telling her story. That's when we're experiencing the sympathy. But she takes us to this abandoned building where Amanda wakes up strapped to a chair. Her head is covered with this reverse bear trap. So put the words suspense / fear. So she wakes up. She has no idea what's going to happen, but it looks like something bad's going to happen. That's our suspense. And, yeah, she's afraid. A monitor then turns on. This is number 3. A monitor turns on. The Jigsaw's creepy doll explains the rules of her game. If she doesn't find the key in time from the stomach of her dead cellmate, her jaw will be ripped open. Now, here put the words apprehension / suspense. So there's a time element there, which is going to create the suspense, but there's also apprehension. The video then shows the trap explode. This is number 4. Put the word terror. Because at that moment, she now sees her own fate. At that point, Amanda utterly freaks out, struggling to break free from the chair. Put the word panic. Panic. So number 6, getting out of the chair starts the timer on the reverse bear trap. She desperately tries to pull the bear trap off. So now we have suspense again and panic. So notice how these emotions, first, there's a sequence to them. They're doing something. They're going to work our way up to something. Second, each one of them, it's very specific what's actually happening. But when you watch it as an audience, you don't go through and identify all the emotions like we're doing here. You don't get to break it down. It's just happening second by second. So it's sucking the audience in. Number 7. Amanda says, and now we're back at the station, she says, and then I saw the body. Amanda approaches the man lying on the ground, motionless. Put the word dread. Dread. Number 8, she sobs, realizing what she must do. Put the word anguish. Anguish. Number 9, she picks up the tiny knife, trembling and sobbing, while her timer continues running out. Put suspense. Suspense. Number 10, the man wakes up. He's alive. He stares helplessly at Amanda, unable to do anything. Her eyes go wide with the realization it's his life or hers. Put the word dilemma. Dilemma. Number 11, she raises the knife and screams as she stabs him over and over again. Put the word hysteria. Hysteria. Number 12, Amanda fishes through the bloody guts and finds the key. She struggles with the slippery conditions to get it into the lock. Put the word disgust. Disgust. Number 13, she gets the trap off a mere second before it triggers. She screams and sobs. Put the word release. Release. Number 14, a light comes on and the creepy doll bicycles into the room on its own. Congratulations, you're still alive. Most people are so ungrateful to be alive, but not you. Not anymore. Put the word moral message. Number 15, back at the police station, Amanda says, he helped me. Put the word moral meaning. And then here comes a big one. Watching the interview, Lawrence is horrified. Now, don't put horrified, put sets up Lawrence cutting off his foot. If you take this scene out, I don't believe that Lawrence cuts his foot off. But the fact that this scene is in here and Lawrence has seen what the jigsaw killer goes to means his foot, he's going to cut his foot off. He has to. He knows he has to. He knows that there is zero choice. This is absolutely real. Now, you'll notice, again, we just went through those emotions. It actually took a little bit to actually identify all of that, but I will tell you it took us 25 times more work to find out how do you create each one of those emotions. And this is what this comes down to. The better you are at creating horror, the more successful you'll be when it comes to going to producers. If what you hope to do is to actually be able to create something that has a chance at the level that we're talking about, you need to really know what you're doing. And you could say, well, these guys fluked on it, and all the other guys that did it before fluked on it. I'm with you. They thought up something. They came up with just the right idea at the right time, and then they somehow were able to create these scenes. So they've probably put a lot of effort into thinking about how they go together. I think it would have been about 20 times as easy for them if they knew exactly how to create every one of these emotions, and if they knew exactly how to set this up so that their script had a real chance at being something that would sell. Now, I know that they got it. They knew it after they got it. But even reading the story of how they came up with these ideas, what became really clear in there was sometimes it took them weeks, and I think in one case it took them over a month to figure out one of the things that ultimately made this franchise sell. So, what if you could do it much faster? What if you knew step by step exactly what would cause one of these scripts to be able to be at that level? What if you knew how to write every step of the way at a professional level that is something that even producers can't do right now? So let me just take you through this class real fast. This is our 30-day class. When people came out of it last time, they were raving about it. Now, we just did it about 3 months ago, so those scripts are going to the market right now. So we're going to find out how they actually fare when they get to the market. But I can tell you, the writers who came out of this class, many of them have screenplays that really do have a chance at this level. And I can also tell you we had writers who had written 7, 8 horror flicks before that, and even writers who had movies made who said during this class they learned things that would have had them completely rewrite those previous movies. So let's just go through it real fast. So our idea up front from the very beginning is, how do you write smart horror, the kind of horror that producers are looking for right this moment? And how do you write the kind of horror that could mirror or could be very close to the kind that has a chance to be made into a franchise? So I'll take you through the list of the days, but let me tell you the first thing that happens. The moment you sign up for this, within about 5 minutes, you're going to get what I call the pre-lesson on this program that will give you 1 month to work with your concept. The high concept is probably the most important part of what you do. So we're setting that up where you get that lesson instantly and you can start working with it. You can start brainstorming different ways to put that together. I'm going to show you exactly how horror concepts go together, exactly what needs to be there, and exactly how to brainstorm them. So you'll have 1 month essentially to go through and brainstorm ideas and come up with as many horror ideas as you can. When the time comes, which is on on March 6th, you come into the horror class starting with day 1. And day 1 is you bring in your concept and then you apply the conventions to it. So you're going to start with that concept that you created over that month-long period of time. And it's going to, usually these concepts are very strong because the people had a chance to think about them and they learned exactly how to create horror concepts. You then will run it through the conventions and you'll build your conventions so that you're making sure from the very beginning, any horror producer that sees this script from the beginning knows that it's marketable. It has a great concept, and the conventions are absolutely there. They're exactly what audiences are expecting when they go to see the movie. On day 2, then you're going to work with how do you create a unique monster. Now, you may already have figured out a monster at this point. It's totally fine. Then what you do is you go through and you elevate that monster. The stronger you can make that monster or that villain, the better your chance of success. So on day 2, you'll be working with the primal fears to make sure that monster delivers in a big way on at least a few of those primal fears. On day 3, then you identify who are your survivors and who are your victims. And pretty much in a horror movie, it's not protagonist, antagonist. It's monster and victims and survivors. So you're going to identify who they are. We'll come back later on and we'll work with them, but you're going to at least get a pretty good idea who they are. Now then, at that point, you will start building your plot. And your plot is really going to consist of 4 different horror tracks. And this is where it's like a lot of times people put in a fairly standard kind of plot, and then they just put horror over the top of it. What we're going to do is we're going to build that horror into your structure and into your plot all the way through. So before you even start trying to figure out how do you create any kind of shaky cam thing or any of those kinds of things, how do you do anything when it comes to the filmmaking, we're going to build so much horror into this script that when you get to that, they won't need to do that stuff. So you start with the horror situations track. What are the situations you're going to build into this structure that you've created? So you first created a horror structure and plot. Then you start building the horror situations in it. And we're going to give you about 20 different horror situations and 20 different escapes. Because it's not just, what's the bad thing they come across. They need to escape. And the escapes, you're going to have people escaping over and over and over. The escapes need to be just as interesting as the actual horror. And sometimes the escapes are even more emotional, more compelling if you do them right. So then from there, then we're going to go to the character death track. And this is where a lot of people have a lot of fun with this. It's who dies first, who dies last, who dies in between, and by the way, what does it mean when they die? Does it mean something? There's specific kinds of meanings you can assign that if you set these things up in a certain sequence where the deaths happen in a certain sequence, it makes it even more emotional for the audience, and it makes it even more intense for the audience. From there, then day 7, we're going to go to the monster reveal track. Now, this is, I've heard people say before, well, I'm going to hide who my monster is or what my monster is or something like that. And then they just hide it till the very end. What I'm going to tell you is it's 10 times more interesting. And when I see it done well in these other movies, it's amazing to be able to watch how they reveal one little piece of the monster at a time, which allows not only your characters but your audience to get engaged in trying to figure it out. And that's what you want. You want your audience the entire time to be wondering, to be trying to figure out who the monster is, to be trying to figure out how are they going to survive, right? So we have a complete set of how you reveal this in a way that every reveal gives us something and it engages us even deeper. And that means we have to stay. Now, listen, here's the other part. I've seen people get up and walk out of horror movies because they're so scared. I've heard people who say that they turned a horror movie off in the middle because it was already starting to scare them and they couldn't watch the rest. What we're going for is this, that they want to turn it off because it's scaring them, but they absolutely have to stay every single moment. And that's what this reveal track is also about, is setting it up so that they have to stay. They have to watch it, even if they can't watch it, they have to watch it. So, and if you can do that kind of thing, you know what? Anybody who reads this script is going to go, oh my God. Now we go to number 8. Now we're looking at the character journey track. Every one of your characters, including the first one who's killed in the opening scene, every one of them have some kind of journey. And this is something that I see missing from a lot, especially the filmmaker ones. They're just putting characters in there to kill them off. And it's like they're meaningless. But if you give each one of those characters a journey, and I'm going to give you specific things so that you can look at every character and say, what's their beginning point, what's their end point, and what are the things that need to happen in between to engage us and to have us be emotionally connected and to have whatever their ending is have an impact on us as an audience. Now, once we've got to the end of that, number 8, you now have probably the best horror movie you've ever written in your life. Very likely. We had people who had written 5 and 6 horror flicks who said, when we got to number 8, before we even started working with our more advanced stuff, they said, this script is already better than anything I've ever written. And it was like, okay, great. Then we went into the best stuff of this class, which is first the emotions. So we have 3 days of emotions. And in each one, we're going to give you very specific emotions. We're going to give you exactly how those emotions show up. And then I'm going to give you the how to create the emotions. And this, again, this is the thing with our development team. This is the thing that took the longest. How do you create dread? Do you know exactly how to do it? So how do you create anguish? How do you create hysteria? But what if you don't want hysteria and you just want panic? What's the difference between those two? And how you create them? Again, this is the thing that took us the longest. Once we got it, I'm completely blown away by it. When you see it, you'll absolutely love it. We've got it down to the most simple instructions. It will become very, very clear to you how to create every one of these emotions. So you're going to spend 3 days in a row. Each day you're going to write a scene where you create the 3 or 4 emotions for that day. We'll give you exactly how to do it, step by step. Then you go into day 12, which is we're going to give you 20 different scares. And by the way, horror and scares are different. Scares are when something just pops up at you and it scares you, and it might not be something bad. Like when you see the lightest version, the cat jumps out and you think it's the monster. There are certain reasons to do scares. There are certain things they actually accomplish. And then, by the way, there's certain things that if you do these things, it's going to look so cheesy. So you have to be really picky about how you do that. We will then give you a series of what we call creepy moments. And these are those kinds of moments in a movie where the audience goes, ugh, don't touch that. Oh, my God. We've got a whole series of them. And what they do is they add another aspect to this. So it's not just, oh, my God, something's going to kill me. It's also, oh, and I have to taste that thing, right? These things, they make it fun and interesting, and they also create a different emotion in your audience. Once you have all of those together, then on day 13, and this is, in my opinion, the most important day of this whole program. On day 13, we teach you our model for creating scary as hell horror scenes. Now, you just saw that with the Amanda scene. This is what I would call a scary as hell horror scene. And you'll notice there's a whole series of emotions and that kind of thing. What we're going to do on day 13 is I'm going to show you exactly how to sequence those emotions, how to set it up, how to take it from one place to another. You're going to get complete control of how you take any scene that you want to make really, truly scary as hell, how you take any scene like that and you build it from an emotional perspective. Now, let me tell you what the difference is between this and what most people do. What most people do is they build it from an action perspective. And this is what we discovered in the midst of this. I interviewed all my horror writers, asked them what they were doing. They were doing it from an action perspective. They'd say, okay, let's see, what if we did this? What if we had the monster jump out at this point, and then we had this happen at this point, and then we had that happen at that point? And then they stood back and went, okay, what would that cause on an emotional level? What we do is the opposite. We actually create it from an emotional. I give you you create an emotional sequence, and then you plug in the actions afterwards. Now, if this doesn't make sense to you yet, don't worry about it. It's a much higher level of creating these kind of quality scenes. And once you get to it, you have to learn how all these emotions work first. But once you get to it, you're going to find out it is incredibly easy to scare audiences in a big way. And in fact, the biggest problem that you'll have after you learn this particular model is, okay, how do I tone it down? And I'll tell you how to do that, don't worry. But you will be able to take any scene and start it at a point where everything's just relaxed and easy, and by the end of the scene have audiences freaking out in fear. And you'll be able to do that over and over and over and over again if you want. And so that will then have you backing up and looking and saying, okay, what's too much? I had one horror writer in the group who said he thought his horror was really, really scary until he got to this, and then he wrote 4 scenes in a row. And he came back and he said, I had 2 people read them, and they completely freaked out, and they said it's way, way, way too much. And what that meant was this. It meant he had now expanded his range, and all he had to do was stand back and put some lighter scenes in between them to allow the audience to recover, and then take them into another scary as hell scene. It also meant No longer is somebody worried about whether or not their third act is going to be scary enough. You know you can do it. So what this is going to give you, and what this program overall is going to give you, is it's going to make you a master at the ability of terrorizing audiences. It's going to give you what it takes to be able to write the kind of horror that first is what producers are calling smart horror, so it matches their needs. Second, it has a real chance of being a breakout kind of movie. And third, you as a writer are going to be considered by most people who read your screenplays to be absolutely amazing at what you do. Again, the people who went through this, the people who had never written a single horror movie in their life, came out saying that the script that they just wrote is scarier than anything they've ever read. The people who had written multiple horror movies were saying now they're writing things that are much more engaging, that keep the audience involved, that have people sitting there going, oh my God, I can't watch anymore, but I have to, right? Which is what we're going for. And ultimately what we're going for is the end of the movie, when people come out of it, they tell their friends, you've got to see that. That's the scariest movie I've ever seen. And when you have that kind of thing, then you have the chance that it becomes one of those franchises. So the course normally costs, $199. We're about 1 month out right now, so you can get $25 off. If you would like to join us, just simply go to this address. Go to bit.ly, bit.ly/horror sign up. So again, it's bit.ly/horror sign up. And those are all no spaces, no capital letters. Just it's bit.ly/HORRORSIGNUP. So, and then as soon as you sign up, within about 5 minutes, you will get that first free lesson, which will actually explain to you and take you through the part that most writers violate in the first place. The part that gives you a real chance, which is how do you create a truly stunning horror concept? How do you create something that even when you say the concept, people go, oh my God, and they're interested, they're engaged. So as soon as you get that, you can start working on it. You'll have about 30 days. We're almost exactly 30 days out. So you'll have 30 days to brainstorm concepts before you come in. We had, in the last group, I had some people tell me they'd come up with like 7 or 8 different concepts that all of them they believed were highly marketable concepts. That's part of our goal. Part of our goal is to have you have something from the beginning that has a real chance of success. Now, by the way, we've never done this with any of our other classes. We've never had them start working on the concept 30 days before they came in. So this is like a real opportunity to be able to make sure that you're coming in with a strong concept, and everything you write has a much, much better chance. So if you liked what we did today here today, if you liked this, if you saw this as something that it's like, wow, if you learned this, not only could it make a big difference for you, but it will give you, the chance not only to become a much, much better writer, but to write the kind of horror movies that producers are looking for right this second. That's what I always wanted when I was a writer. I wish I would have known what was right up to that moment and what really would give me the chance of succeeding. This will do that for you. So come in, give it your best. At minimum, by the time you're done with this, you know how to create 10 different horror emotions, which is what most people don't know how to do. You know how to create a horror plot that is multi-layered. It's not just some thin plot. And you know exactly step by step how to go through and write a great horror movie. This is something that'll give you a real chance. And if what you want to do is to shoot your own movie, make sure you do this first. the one thing, spending like this is $174 for this 30-day class. If you're going to shoot your own horror movie, having a great script first is what will make your movie great. And then everything else that you add to it after that makes it better. But if you go in with a bad script first, it doesn't matter what you do. So give yourself your best possible chance of success. And I promise you, by the way, like all of our other classes, this one is guaranteed. If by the end of the third day you don't like it for any reason, as long as you email us before the fourth day, we'll absolutely give you your money back. And we don't ask any questions on that. We just do it because I want our writers really well taken care of. But on this class, once you get into it, you're going to see every single day is going to give you some kind of breakthrough. Every day is going to fill in some kind of gap that's missing. And if you've written other scripts, like you've written thrillers or dramas or any of those other kind of things, I got to tell you, when you get here, you're going to see that horror in and of itself is a very different animal that you can easily master. So come join us to do this. I promise you, you will be so glad you did. And whoever ends up working with you in the future, whoever ends up optioning your screenplay, or if you end up making the movie yourself, anybody who is part of this is going to be glad that you wrote the script in this class. So with that, I'm going to close it out. Listen, thanks, guys, for being here today. I hope you got a lot out of this, and I can't wait to work with you in this upcoming horror class. This is Hal Krosman with Screenwriting U. Bye-bye, everyone.